Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum. We continue our operation. It's day 321 of our fight for freedom, and now we will be talking about our power grid and its condition. Joining us as a guest is Oleksandr Kharchenko, the director at the Energy Industry Research Center. Good afternoon, Mr. Oleksandr. Good afternoon. Well, we had a breather during the holidays. Most of us had lights in our homes, but now we've seen that we're getting back to the scheduled rolling power shutdown. So what's the current condition of our power grid? So there are two trends. Is a competition between cold Russian drones and Russian missiles, and on the other hand, it's on the other end is their repairing teams trying to repair our energy grid. The holidays passed in a calm manner because the industry was not operating mostly, and most of the power was channeled to the household consumers, and that's why it was this time was more comfortable for all the households. But now the industry is getting back in action, and it takes power from the grid, and the temperatures are falling as well, and each degree of temperature coming lower requires about 180 to 200 megawatts of power. So in fact it's a one power block of a coal power plant. So that there is certain deficit of generation, and it's substantial. And on the other hand, the most recent attacks by the Russian terrorists did not result in any substantial damage, and the schedules which are currently in effect there are mostly being complied with. They are not maybe 100% forecasted, but there may be some emergency situations arising. But I would say that the schedules are 95-97% forecastable, and that they can contemplate the amount of energy supplied to the consumers. Sometimes during nighttime we manage not to get the consumers disconnected at all, but now that the temperatures are getting colder, we may impose the switch-offs, the shutdowns during nights, but the trend is such that the small capacities are being reconnected to the grid, and the question is when another missile strike is gonna happen, and we cannot say what would be results of such an attack. So now we focus all of our efforts on preparation to the next attack and to the reconnection of these small capacities to the power grid to supply the power to the consumers. And then we all work together, the power technicians and the military, I mean the air defense and the stuff. You mentioned the deficit of generation. Can you give us the percentage? Well, the average daily deficit is 20 to 30% at the moment, but since now the temperatures are getting lower, there is certain threat that even regardless the reconnection of the smaller capacities, the consumption grows as well. We've heard a lot of talks among Ukrainians that who say that if it's possible to ensure the normal power supply during holidays, why is it impossible during the weekdays? So we've heard your statement that shortly, maybe in February, it would be possible to create the security umbrella above Kyiv, which would protect us against blackouts. Can you please elaborate on that? It's not my statement, it's the project that I know about, which is being implemented by the government, by donors and the municipal administration, and the works are in progress to protect first Kyiv and then other big cities against blackouts, to protect the critical infrastructure of the cities. I mean, the heat supply system and water supply system, so that the electric power shutdowns would not result in shutdowns of water and heat supply. And this work is very active for what I know, and I think that the official announcements are coming shortly. I'm sure that all the big cities of Ukraine should be equipped with such reserve generation capacities, because it's very important given the conditions we end up in. So it's not about any additional air defense systems incoming, or it's about the technical solutions. Yes, it's about technical solutions, how to create more generating capacities for big cities, so that even in situation when the Moscow terrorists, for example, make it, destroying some part of the high voltage network, and it's impossible to deliver the power to the big cities. Unfortunately, Kyiv and Kharkiv and Odessa were in those situations, and not only those cities but others as well. So these reserve systems inside the cities, they should be created, and these works are in progress, as I mentioned. As to the operation of our nuclear power plants, what's going on there? How can we ensure their operation so that it does not result in emergency shutdowns, as it did happen before? For what I know, Energoatom, as the state-operated company which operates the nuclear power plants, takes most efforts possible for proper operation of the nuclear power plants, and the main problems were in high voltage equipment, because the high voltage substations were damaged mostly. They were the biggest issue, and in part this problem is already solved, but in part we have to still order high voltage transformers, which does not happen very quickly. As to the renewal of systematic operation, we understand that it takes a little bit more time than some emergency works which are taking place immediately. Do we work in that area, and what are the success? Well, it was already the president who stated about that, and there were statements from the prime minister, so we can state that it's in focus of government's attention, and the works are in progress on development of a very strict plan of reconstruction of, I would not say renewal, but reconstruction of Ukrainian and power grid, because it will be the new energy grid, and it will be built based on a number of comprehensible principles. So it will be ecologically oriented model aimed at less emissions. Ukraine was one of the leaders from the point of view of power grid. Our CO2 emissions are 30% lower than average European, but now it's 100% sure that Ukrainian power grid will be less dependable on the coal capacities, and which will result in less emissions. It will be a very branched out system of facilities which generate heat and electric power for small and medium-sized towns, and they would be able to use Ukrainian raw materials like even trash or pellets, and we have other types of waste of agrarian industry that may and should be used to replace the natural gas in generation of heat, and to increase the generation of electric power, and the wind and solar power stations will be added to that, and as well nuclear generation will be developing. Ukraine has experience and very good technical school for development of nuclear power plants, and to return the status of the electric power exporters, so we can support our European neighbors in terms of supplying their countries with electric power, because many countries have need for import of Ukrainian electric power. Oleksandr, maybe the question which concerns all the Ukrainians. Are we going to live with the scheduled power shutdowns until the end of the winter? Yes, I have to be straight and honest with the people. I see no possibility based on the amount of the equipment being procured and time necessary for its arrival, and based on the schedule of consumption that we have, I don't see any possibility for us to withdraw from this regime of the rolling power shutdowns. It's very unlikely. I think that April is probably the time when we, if everything goes well and we are successful in rebuilding after the next attacks. So April will be the month when the Ukrainians will get access to the normal electric power supply. Today we had Oleg Korikov in this studio, and coming back to the subject of nuclear power plant, there is already an agreement, a resolution that the representatives of IAEA will be present in all of our nuclear power plants, including Chernobyl power plant. What such presence will give us, how it will reinforce our positions in international market. Well, it's more for IAEA and for Держатомрегулювання for their calmness mostly, but from the practical point of view, from point of view of technical results, I don't see anything. It's just a monitoring mission that will show that Ukraine behaves well, but in this situation, when we behave well, we just don't worry about that. Ukraine doesn't try to do any prohibited steps in terms of operation of nuclear power plants, and I'm absolutely sure about that. And I can't help by asking about your expert opinion regarding the issues with Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, about creation of some safety zone around it. Do you think that we will be able to achieve such agreements? What can be such agreements? I think that the best agreement will be on part of armed forces of Ukraine, and they will implement this agreement in the most efficient manner possible. Thank you, dear colleagues. Your questions, please. Yana Koloda, Ukrinform, good afternoon. I have a question to you. What's the situation with the electric power supply in the south and east, and when can the consumers expect for the electric power supply to be reestablished? Well, let's be honest, the situation is quite complicated. In the east, when we're talking about the areas along the front lines in Kherson region, for example, everything is technically destroyed. The kilometers of aerial lines are blown up, the substations are all destroyed and blown up. Everything which is related to heating and electric power supply is destroyed. Now the electric power supply is being reestablished there, but the rockets and shells keep coming and everything is destroyed again. So this is the reality that we end up in. Dear friends, any more questions? Well, now that we don't have any more questions in this studio, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing this information with us. Dear colleagues, I'm reminding you, joining us was Oleksandr Kharchenko, the director at the Energy Industry Research Center. Our next briefing is at 1600, and joining us will be Andriy Demchenko, the spokesperson of the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine. So bear with us, and glory to Ukraine. Thank you for invitation.